I'm going to call this meeting to order. I would like to welcome especially our new school commissioners, Commissioner Curry from Ward 3, Commissioner Jenkins from Ward 7, and Commissioner Stoll from Ward 5. Welcome with us. And everybody else. This evening, by charter, the most senior member of the board is to start the meeting off. And I will be going through until the nominations, and then I will turn it over to the second most senior member, who happens to be our clerk, to work from the reorganization of the board, just for your information. We'll start off now with those who have been elected or re-elected to take the oath of office. So please stand while it is ministered to you.
You'll raise your hand. It will say I, and then you put in your name. Okay, I do solemnly swear or affirm that I will faithfully execute the office of the Burlington Board of School Commissioner to the best of my judgment and ability, according to law, so help me God, under the pains and penalties of perjury.
So help me God.
Congratulations. Welcome to the new board.
Congratulations. Thank you very much. Now, if everyone would stand, we'll do the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. With the clerk, please call the roll.
Catherine Chasen.
Here.
Liz Curry. Linda Del Duca.
Here.
Jill Evans.
Here.
Rebecca Grimm.
Here.
Patrick Holliday. Here. Greg Jenkins. Here. Eric Cranchfield. Here. Alan Matson.
Here.
Bernie O'Rourke. Here. Keith Pilker.
Here.
Marion Stoll.
Here.
Ben Truman.
Here.
Meredith Woodruff King.
Here.
Emily Lansky.
Here.
Peter Lane.
Here. Great, we're all here. Next item on our agenda is the approval of the agenda. Can I have a motion to approve the agenda? Commissioner Grimm, seconded by Commissioner Chasen. Are there any changes to our agenda? Commissioner Rourke?
Item 10B, I believe we took care of that at the last meeting.
We did.
Okay.
So 10B will be deleted from our agenda. Are there any other items that you'd like to delete or add? All those in favor of the agenda as amended, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? The next item is the reorganization of the board, and I will ask the next senior member to come forward.
Okay, so the first item of business is, I believe, to ask for nominations from the floor for the office of chair of the Burlington School Board.
I'd like to nominate Alan Matson, please.
Alan Matson. Is there a second?
I don't think it needs a second.
It doesn't actually. It doesn't, okay. Any other nominations?
I'd like to nominate Keith Pillsbury.
Yeah, anyone else? All right, so before we vote or discuss, I'd like each of the nominees to take a few minutes and tell us why they're interested in this position and what their plans might be. So, I don't know, Alan or Keith? Keith,
Willing to go
Alan?
first?
Alan,
Sure.
take it away.
I think, as I've mentioned to all of you one time or another over the last several weeks, as I ran for the board this year and looked at what role I'd like to take, I thought back on what I have done, which has included chairing policy committee, finance committees, and also an ad hoc committee over the summer that worked on zero-based budgeting. And I decided that some of the things that I was looking for out of the board and wanted to work with on the board could really be best achieved through being the chair. And as I've mentioned, I think that there's kind of three key areas that I wanted to work on. And the first was basically to improve the board's ability to hold ourselves accountable. And this is a fairly broad statement, but primarily to improve the efficiency and effectiveness of the board. One of my concerns over the long run is on the efficiency side that there's 14 of us and we're often running unopposed. And I want to make sure that the time commitment necessary as a board member is not something that becomes so daunting that we keep people from running for the board or taking an active role in the board. On the effectiveness side, I think that we need to get to the point where we can also hold ourselves accountable individually as board members, as well as holding our board chair, the board itself, and board committees accountable to set goals that we're looking to achieve during the year or even during a meeting. Second part is I'd like to work on improving the full board's ability to communicate clearly with the superintendent. I think it's important that we develop a strong board-superintendent relationship that reflects the full voice of the board, and likewise the board is comfortable that it's been fully informed of what is happening within the district through the superintendent. And finally, I'd like to use this efficiency and effectiveness to really look at and build on our existing board goals, in particular by defining measurable achievements under these overarching goals. And a couple that I would like to mention in particular would be one of the goal that we had for a long-term facilities plan. I think I'd really hope that the board could work this year, and I would make it a priority to really look at one major issue that we've talked about a lot over the couple years, which is this building and this campus itself. What can we and what should we be doing with the facility here at Burlington High School over the next several to set it up for the next several decades? The second place I'd like to look closely would be in finance, to make sure that we really do develop this long-term strategic plan. As we talked about much during this past budget cycle, inflation in the educational world is outstripping the education in the regular world, and we need to figure out how we can address that. So the things that really are pushing the costs in education don't end up crowding out the money in, the resources that we're able to put in the classrooms and directly into our children. And on those three main points, those are the three things that I'd really like to work on during the year and achieve with the entire board if I were elected chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Keith?
I can just imagine my most encouraging teacher, Mrs. Cole, telling me to speak slowly and keep my eyes up. So I'll do the best I can, Mrs. Cole. Being board chair is all about serving Burlington's children within our resources. I will continue to give my energy and passion to creating the change needed to their learning environment to allow all to reach their potential. I am committed to our board's code of conduct. I believe in inclusion of all voices with respect, transparency, and the open democratic process. I'm committed to our plan for equity and inclusion, more rigorous evaluation and accountability of all our employees, instructional improvement, and a strategic plan for fiscal management. I support facilities upgrades for security in some buildings and expanding others for our growing student population. I am committed to rigorous supervision and evaluation of our superintendent. We are facing intense teacher negotiations. Our high school needs a major renovation to remove it from the warning status and bring it into compliance with the accreditation standards of the New England Association of Schools and Colleges. This past year, I've been sitting at the bargaining table with the teachers, and I have been involved with planning facility strategic plans for many years. As chairman representing you, I have been developing relationships with the leaders of our unions, teachers, faculty members, administrators, legislators, and our budget critics. I believe my respectful listening over the years and responses to gives them a healthier feeling towards our schools, which all agree are important to the economic vitality of our city and the future of our children. I ask for your support to continue to implement the major changes that we are undertaking in our system. Thank you.
So, is it the pleasure of the board that we vote by raising our hands when I ask the question? That's fine? Okay. All right, so we had Alan's name first, so all those in favor of Alan Matson for board chair, please raise your hand. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. I got 9, is that, and the 2 students. And all those in favor of Keith Pillsbury? 5. So, congratulations, Alan, you're our new chair.
Am I to take over at this point?
You are to take over this point.
I think we should all thank Keith Pillsbury first.
Absolutely.
Sorry about I hope everybody doesn't mind. I want to take just less than 2 minutes to say a couple things here. First off, to the board, thank you very much. There are 14 members on the board, and basically, not counting me, my important role is to, not necessarily to lead, to guide, but I feel really to organize the board as we go forward this next year. So thank you all for this opportunity, and I am truly excited about the upcoming year. I will be handing out a note with a bunch of questions that I hope you guys can just kind of mark off and try to get back to me before you leave tonight, because one of the first things I need to do is work on setting committees, and as well setting a planning session or 2 for the month of April for the year. And probably even more importantly, I'd like to take a couple minutes here and really thank Keith for all that he did this past couple years, and that he will certainly also be involved in a leadership role, I would hope, in the next year and 2 years, ideally. Keith talked about some of the challenges we have coming up this year, and something he didn't touch upon as much were some of the challenges we came through this past year. And I think that they are difficult times, that Keith really took us through these, and I really have to hold him in admiration. At one point, Keith had said something to me about, almost to the point of, wish you would have been involved more directly last year, and I can see why. Last year was a real challenge, and I think that it probably will never get any easier. I think that when you sit in this chair, I can only imagine how difficult it can be, and I think for a year from now, it'd probably be a lot less to my imagination. So Keith, I really want to thank you for all the hard work you did this year. If I started listing down all the things that we have been able to get done in the past 2 years under your chairmanship, we'd be here for way too long. So I would just like to add a second thank you to Keith, and appreciate all you've done. And as I said, I really do hope you involve yourself as a leader on this board in the upcoming year as well. So thank you all again, And I think at this point, we would move on to the next agenda item, which is the election of the clerk, yes. And not having, I guess I would say, at this point, the election of the clerk is also an election. So I would ask if there are any nominations from the floor for the clerk. Meredith.
I nominate Kathy Chason.
Thank you.
Kathy? Kathy Chason? Are there any other nominations?
I hope you're.
At this point in time, we actually still need to vote, as in, even with no other nominations, people would be able to vote otherwise. But I would again ask, if it's everybody's pleasure, we will just do this by a show of hands. All in favor of our nomination, Kathy Chason, for clerk, please raise their hand. And I see 13 votes yes, 1 person not voting, and the 2 students also voting yes. Kathy, you are clerk. Would you like to say anything? At this point in time, it is the point in our agenda where we hold public comment. During this time, members of the public, members of the staff are welcome to address the Burlington School District School Board on any issue that they like. It is not a time that we will engage in a debate or a discussion of the issues, although the typical board pattern in the last several months has been to take a point in time after all folks who would like to speak have spoken. The board may take a few minutes to reflect on what we've heard for the evening. But as I said before, this is not necessarily a time for a debate, but it is a time where any and all of you are welcome and in fact encouraged to address, again, as I said, any issue that you would like before the board. And we do have a sign up that if you have not signed up, it doesn't keep you from speaking, but I will go by the list, and if I mispronounce your name, I would hope that you could correct me, as I'm not the best at reading handwriting at all times. And the first name I see on the list tonight, I think, is Jay Diaz. Is that right? Thank you, Jay.
Hi, thank you everybody, and thank you for having me. Congratulations to the new board members, and congratulations to the advisory committee on this excellent report that they've put out. It's a valuable report and a valuable tool for educators, for I think the board, and for the district, as well as the community. My name is Jay Diaz. I am an attorney at Vermont Legal Aid. I've been brought here and have been in Burlington for the last 6 months to work on an education rights project for low-income communities. My project spans Vermont, but I am based here in Burlington and have been taking particular interest in what's going on in Burlington schools. I've been a member of the Partnership for Change, have spoken with a number of different community advocates, and simply wanted to introduce myself first off to the members of the board and say that I look forward to working with you on a number of issues. I represent a lot of the people who are in the schools in Burlington and in other towns nearby and across the state, especially those who are from low-income communities. So I am here today also to highlight one particular issue that's brought up in the report. That is the issue of school discipline and its disparate impact on specific communities. I have here just a one-pager I'd like to hand out to the board just so people can have an idea of what's in the report, highlight a couple of things, and say, a little bit about that. So if you wouldn't mind. I hope there's enough for everybody. I printed out 20, legal aid, we're always strapped for resources, so I did the best I could. But I just wanted to highlight this issue. It's one among many highlighted in the report that are of significant, great importance to what's going on here in Burlington and what we can do for our kids, especially those who are low income or on free and reduced lunch. It highlights the myths of effectiveness on out-of-school suspension. It discusses the harmful effects of out-of-school suspension. Specifically, I would bring your attention to the fact that when kids are out of school, they aren't learning, and that hurts our achievement and probably adds to our achievement gap. It focuses and gives you information on what the district numbers are in terms of the disparities and percentages of kids who are suspended. And it gives a couple of possibilities and examples of policies and alternatives and ways we can take a look at ways to decrease out-of-school suspension using alternative discipline policies and increase safety at the same time. I think, it's a valuable information that's been given by the advisory committee, and I hope you all take a look at this. And I want to say that I am here to offer my suggestions. I've been working on this issue for a number of years in law school and now here in Vermont. And I've been studying the issue, and I would like to offer my suggestions. I would like to assist with any studies, implementation, and evaluation of any programs that are available and that the district is thinking about implementing. So I really appreciate everyone's time, and I appreciate your willingness to allow public comment and to have us here to speak with you. I'd be happy to answer any questions. My contact information is at the bottom of the sheet if anyone would like to contact me after the meeting. Again, I congratulate the advisory committee on this report, and I thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Next on the list is Dave Stemke.
Good evening. I've come to talk to you about the proposed athletic budget cut of 15% that was in the last budget round. You have to pardon me, I'm an engineer, I'm a visual guy, so I decided to make a little graph to scale. This is the athletic budget as you see it, that's the 15% cut. And what I wanted us to see was how big an impact it had in your overall budget. It's there. It's the width of one leaded pencil, 0.5 millimeters. This is the scale. It has no impact on your budget. But what does it have an impact on? 50 to 60% of the students at BHS are affected by that budget, the athletic budget. And this money, they're getting benefit from directly. The only other thing in the budget item that I can find that directly influences students is teachers' salaries, not because they're in the classroom and they're teaching the kids at that time. The athletic budget, they're out in the fields or whatever, they're learning valuable lessons. And I was looking at why should we spend this money? Why should we spend this money on athletics? And I started thinking, and a little help from some other hockey parents, and it dawned on me, if we go look at a magnet school type model where we're teaching the fundamentals of education, but we also surround them with this common interest of things, whatever that may be. Athletics is doing the exact same thing. It's been doing it since, I don't know, my father said he was playing football in the 1930s, so the schools have been doing this forever. They've been doing the magnet theme forever, to get those kids in, to draw them in, and keep them interested. Now, some of these kids, I mean, we have a very diverse school, and with that, we have a lot of diverse interests and a lot of diverse culture. So unfortunately, to have a magnet model, you also have to provide a diverse amount of athletics or extracurricular activities for these kids to be engaged and be participating in. And these kids are interested. And I'll use hockey as an example. I admit it. I'm here for hockey. Hockey, some of these kids have been playing hockey for 10 years. Can you imagine going to school, working to get a job for 10 years, and you get there and find out the place is closed, they no longer make what you have been studying to do? That's what these kids are going to be doing if athletic budgets keeps declining and being cut. And to get on, and I'm a good example of what sports has done. It was in my life. Sports got me through high school. It got me into college, literally, playing football. Back where I didn't play hockey, back where I was, the culture was football. It got me into college, it got me playing football. When I was done doing that, the tools I learned, I wasn't the best student, but the tools I learned on the athletic field, on the practice field, on the coaches, got me to become an engineer. And that's, to me, it was invaluable lessons. It's still invaluable lessons that I have today. So just to bring on a little bit about the hockey team, got another figure for you. This is, the top line is the max allowed for there was a question on numbers on the team, that we don't have enough numbers to support a team. The top line is the max allowed by the Vermont Principal Association, 24. The bottom line was the average D2 team in the state of Vermont. Here's where we are for the projected next 5 years. We are right in there, right in the mix, right in the where we should be. The other issue was the expense of hockey. They say per student, they're paying a lot of money. One thing that was not figured into it was, if you look at the varsity sports that use that field out there, we currently in your budget, there's $109,000 in the budget to pay interest on that field every year. Divide that by 7, that's $15,000 a year per varsity sport to use a facility. The hockey's only $12,000 a year. Everything else being equal, those are the two big discriminators on everything and the cost. So if you're going to apply a 15% cut, it shouldn't be targeted for one specific sport. It should be maybe spread out. I don't think you should have any cut whatsoever. And just as an emphasis on what the taxpayer thinks about athletics, they're paying for that field. They voted for that field. They don't expect, okay, now let's take away, the use of the field. So the taxpayers are supporting the budget and supporting the athletics too. Thank you.
Thank you, Dan. Next is Dave Bardaglio.
Thank you. So I'm not very good at speaking spontaneously or just notes. I actually have a prepared statement that I will actually read, and I have copies for everybody. So, hello, my name is David Bardaglio. I am here to urge the board to restore the 15% cut made to the sports and co-curricular budgets. I have a son who has been in Burlington School since kindergarten and is currently a freshman at BHS. He is a member of the BHS varsity hockey team. My daughter attended Burlington schools from kindergarten all the way through high school. She graduated from BHS last year. My wife and I are deeply committed to the Burlington public school system. I cannot tell you how important being a member of the hockey team has been for my son. Being on the hockey team has connected into the BHS school community and motivated him academically in ways that no amount of parental prodding could ever have accomplished. My daughter was involved in co-curricular activities throughout her entire 4 years at BHS. She acted in numerous plays, worked on the tech crew for many other plays, and co-directed a one-act play her senior year. She also participated in the Model UN program and was a member of the BHS school newspaper staff. She did very well academically at BHS, but I have to believe that her many extracurricular activities are what helped distinguish her from her peers. It certainly had to be a factor in her being accepted early decision to a highly selective college. I noticed that one of the board's core values is data-informed decision-making. The data supporting the connection between sports, extracurricular activities, and academic success is overwhelming. Just Google the topic and citations to dozens of studies come up. One such study was recently completed by the Los Angeles Public School System. This study, quote, has discovered a striking correlation between students' participation in interscholastic athletics and their performance in both attendance and in the classroom, end quote. Another report done by the University of Minnesota found, quote, the research has time and again demonstrated a strong and positive correlation between high school sports participation and academic achievement. This basic baseline finding holds for a wide variety of measures and on a whole range of data sets, methodological approaches, and social conditions, end quote. If data-informed decision-making is truly a board core value, then it seems hard to believe that the board would cut the sports and co-curricular budgets. These near-term savings will only lead to higher societal costs over the long run. One might also conclude that 15% is a small reduction. However, as the BHS hockey community recently found out, this reduction might lead to the elimination of the BHS varsity hockey program. This is at a time when the player numbers are clearly on the way up. Also, it is my understanding that the sports budget has been level funded for many years. As a result, these budgets have actually been reduced all these years, given that they are not even keeping up with inflation. Over the past 5 years, the consumer price index for the Northeast increased by 10%, and over the last 10 years, it increased by 29%. So a 15% cut on top of the years of level funding will most certainly have a big impact. So, along with many other parents and Burlington students, I urge the board to consider reallocating its available resources for the upcoming school year and restore the sports and co-curricular budgets to their current year levels. And finally, if the board does not restore the 15% cut, I implore the board to advocate for a fair distribution of these cuts such that no one sport is eliminated. BHS hockey should not have to bear the full weight of any budget cuts. I thank the school board for giving me this opportunity to speak.
Thank you, David. Thank you. Next is Diana Langston.
Good evening. I wanted to talk to you tonight about the positive work that I feel our early ed department has done in relation to our mission around diversity and equity. And from the beginning of the school year, where we kicked off our workshop with Paul Gorski, our staff in our small program has had 7 focused activities this year around diversity and equity. And I'd have to say my staff has positively engaged in every one of them and has really walked away from each one of them feeling like they're empowered and eager to do more of this work. We followed up the Paul Gorski workshop with a focused discussion with our group, and I just wanted to share a few key points from that discussion. One was that they found it thought-provoking to keep the conversation going by looking at where we started this conversation last year, at our own biases, and to remind us to keep an awareness around this conversation. They acknowledge that we need to continue and not to be afraid of these exchanges. We talked a little bit about what we were doing well around equity, race, and diversity, and we acknowledge that we do have a lot to learn, but we intentionally use our resources that are around us and explore our races and our ethnicity and culture in our community. And we're fortunate because the age of our children allow us to be inspired and encouraged and easily communicate and form true partnerships. One of the things our group said was that we needed to look at our dismissal, early dismissal days and our in-service days, and really use that time to learn more about the cultures of our students and to focus our professional development. So because of that work that started the year, we have then continued again with 6 more conversations after that. All of our staff have put personal goals in their individual personal development plans around this topic. We're able to participate in the race exhibit at the Echo Center, and again followed up with a very rich and engaging conversation with our staff. We participated in the harassment training that occurred this year. And recently, we looked at the equity and inclusion report. And we looked at that in relation to our early ed program and said, okay, it's starting with us. What are we doing to help in that realm? And we looked at how are we supporting the free and reduced lunch children in our program at this early age. And we're blessed to be part of the Burlington School District's food program, knowing that we're giving our children breakfast, lunch, and snack, that we communicate with home very frequently, but we've changed that a little bit this year and added visual to our communication so that all parents can have an idea of what happened in their child's day at school, and they can engage in conversation with their children at home. We were fortunate to have an ELL teacher from our district, Beth Evans, join one of our early childhood teachers and do a workshop for our partner programs in the community and to foster language development in the English language learners that were also in community programs. We were able to start using a social skills program at the Early Ed Center called the Second Step program, hoping to help children identify their social emotional skills, their feelings, their behaviors, and help that training start very early on. And we continue to have these rich conversations, to work with our community partners like the Howard Center and Head Start. And next month, we will have our liaisons join us for a roundtable discussion around the different cultures that we serve in our program. I feel like all this work has been inspired by the work that the district initiated this year, and wanted you to know that our program feels like we have really been inspired and we've benefited from the direction that the district has led us in.
Thank you, Dana. Next, Amy Mellencamp. This does not really look like Amy, but
Amy sends her regrets. She had a conflicting meeting tonight, so I'm here in her place. My name is Nick Molander. I'm one of the assistant principals, and I too want to congratulate the new board members and Alan on your election. It's going to be an exciting term. I know we have lots of changes and lots of things that you're inheriting. So I look forward to having anyone on the board come in and visit our school and see what we're doing every day. There's no better way to get to know the kind of things that you're going to be discussing, planning, asked to make some very important decisions on, than to see how they affect the students. So my office is that beautiful glass space that the mayor got to sit in for a week. We'd love to have you, and I encourage you to stop by. Amy had a prepared statement that she would like me to read, and then I just was thinking of some other things that I wanted to add, specifically about our work with diversity and equity this year. So let me read what Amy had prepared. Good evening. Amy wanted to take the opportunity to make a few comments on the release of the Equity and Inclusion Report Card this evening. This last month, as a school, we reviewed major findings and data sets in the report during a faculty meeting led by 4 BHS teachers. In this meeting, we looked at achievement gap data in small groups. We identified additional strategies for our continued work in addressing and closing achievement gaps in school achievement. This work, along with our focus this year on academic and community building in the 9th grade, our new year-end studies program, and I'm sure some of you may not know what that means, and I'd be happy to help you understand that, that will mix students up across the school into student-selected project learning courses, our additional English language learner teachers and classes, as well as our regular meetings of faculty members since the beginning of the school year focused on race and diversity, is evidence of our school's commitment to create more opportunities for all students to meet high academic standards. Amy would like to extend her thanks to the committee members for all the work that they did in creating this baseline report, which will help us continue to progress both as a school and as a community. I guess as an aside, I want to add that we certainly still have work to do, and that we're still trying to find ways to include all the voices within our staff, within our community, so they can feel safe, they can feel encouraged to move forward with the work. We've had a lot of success this year with our staff engaging in the Washington consulting trainings. It's something that they want more of. They want those trainings. We've held some brown bag lunch series where we were looking at a video series on the history of racism in the United States. That led to some very spirited discussions on a Google Doc form, which eventually got teachers talking not about the history of racism, but how it's affecting our students and really questioning changes in our curriculum and placement, and we're contemplating some very serious changes in how we're looking at our 9th grade curriculum next year. I think right now, the best thing that I've seen is that people are willing to admit that they're fearful, that they don't have all the answers, but those aren't reasons that they would give to not try. That we have a faculty and we have a staff committed to wanting to try. They may disagree sometimes, but they want to continue the conversation. So I would say on behalf of the school, we are very thankful that you have allocated resources to continue that conversation, and I would ask that you continue to recognize that the staff are hungry for the opportunities to have, to talk, and to be part of the conversation. So thank you.
Thank you, Nick. Amy? Next, CJ Spirito.
Good evening. My name is CJ Spirito, and I'm here as a parent of a high schooler and middle schooler in the Burlington School District. I'm also here as a local educator. I'm the head of Rock Point School, and I'm embarrassed to say this is my first school board meeting because I voted for the budget to pass, and then later on realized, hey, that included a 15% cut in co-curricular activities, and wish I'd come earlier and talked about these things. I wanted to thank you for having an ear, knowing that the process is you talk about it, then you vote on it. You don't vote on it, then talk. But I'm still here anyway to echo David and Dan's words about the importance of hockey for a small group of kids. I have anecdotal information around my 23 years at Rock Point School, working with teens, and knowing the importance of having things that are meaningful, active, and collaborative between their peers and with adults. That I think the Burlington School District does a great job of educating in the classroom, and that the sports and after-school programs is essential in rounding off the education. Our education is about relationships and learning how to be in the world, and I believe that sports provides that. I also know very well the concept of budget constraints and money has to get cut somewhere. I'm hoping that we can reconsider the percent cut at all, and if so, having it spread amongst all the sports has been requested already, because I feel like hockey is an essential experience for many kids, and I, as a parent, will commit myself to be very involved in getting more numbers and having a healthier feeder program to ensure that the hockey team will have players, and also that kids who may not want to play in the hockey team but may want to learn how to skate and play will have opportunities to do that. I feel confident about this, both in my desire to do so, but in the people I know on the school board, and also the receptivity that we've gotten from Amy Mellencamp, Nick Molander, Jeannie Halson. I feel like people got pretty spirited when we found out the hockey program could be cut. And the conversation could have gone very differently. It could have been adversarial, but I found that the voices were received, and there was a real engaged conversation about how can we figure this out together. We're not sure how it's going to happen, but let's figure this out together. And I think that involves students. The first meeting that I went to, and I've been talking to my own kids and showing, hey, I wish I'd done more research in the budget before I voted on it, and I'm learning and showing this to my own kids. So thank you for hearing this out.
Thanks, CJ.
Yep.
Jane Burchard.
Hi, my name is Jane Burchard, and I am the parent of both a hockey student and a drama student here at BHS. And I would also like to add my voice to encourage the board and echo the sentiments of the other parents here to do everything, please, in your power to restore the 15% budget cut, the current budget, for both athletics and co-curriculars like drama. Thank you.
Jane? At this point, there are no more names on the list, but as I mentioned at the start, anyone who would like to speak could also just come up and introduce yourself at this point.
Hello. My name is Brian Williams. I'm the
principal of the Sustainability Academy. I think I'm on the agenda later tonight, or some information about that. It's good to see you all. Thank you very much for being here. I want to talk about a couple things. One is the use of data and how important it is for school leaders to make decisions based on data. So every week, our behavior support team meets before school on Thursday, and we go through our Swiss data. And we break it down in a variety of different ways. We break it down according to sex, we break it down according to race, we break it down according to socioeconomic status, and we want to take a very clear look at when we are having instances of disciplinary action with students. We want to know the most that we can about the situation so that we can make the most informed decision. A lot of the times the decision is not going to change based on the profile of the student involved, but I think it's really important to consider the context of every disciplinary situation. But we really like to work proactively, and we're constantly engaging with students, with families, to try and figure out what supports they need, how we can best help them in their very complicated lives. And seeing as we're in the heart of the Old North End, and 30% of our students are new arrivals, and many of them are from families that have lived in generational poverty, that the issues are complex and that we need to engage in as many ways as possible and with as much information as possible as we can. So sometimes, you know, it's shocking, and sometimes it's eye-opening, but always we can't be afraid to look at what the numbers are telling us and what we can mine from those numbers. Now, that being said, as a school devoted to education for sustainability, and one of our themes is social equity and justice, we include issues of diversity throughout our curriculum and throughout our campus practices and throughout the way that we build and share community. Whether it's our kindergarten with their community, or our 2-3 who's doing a can drive for the food shelf, or they're actually doing research about the food that our community consumes and raising money so that we can go to the Himalayan market and buy food that our families might need or enjoy, and then donating that to the food shelf. Or our 4-5 team who's working on a human movement, reading about the lost boys of the Sudan. Or even our library, which makes very intentional choices about the types of literature that we bring in, and the fact that we've replaced a lot of our books with literature that truly reflects the fabric of our community, and it's very inspiring, including the book bags that Susanna Patterson, our Learning Center coordinator, created that are themed, and whether it's social equity and justice or composting or maple sugaring, these book bags are available to the community. They have books for children, books for adults, books that can be read by adults to children, books that can be read by children to adults. But it's just one of the many ways that we want to include families as much as we can in the learning environment. So I'm just coming from math night at SA. We had a great turnout, probably 75 people. It was a very diverse representation of our community, and it was really encouraging to see families bringing their neighbors' children, bringing children from other cultures, from other races, and just showing up and having a great time learning about math, having some healthy refreshments, spending time together. And we try to do that as much as possible at the SA. We try to make cultural dinners. We try to make our Monday morning meeting. We try to make every opportunity where we can bring people together an opportunity where we can learn from each other and where we can grow as a community and we can celebrate our differences. Because the reality is that if we can do the work now with our parents, not only with our parents, but with our children, and not only with our children, but with their parents, we can build a community that when they go off to the middle school, when they come up to the high school, they will have grown up in a culture, in a community that has very high expectations for respect, for support, for community. And I think that all of Burlington values those. We're just in a unique situation where maybe we're a little bit more public about it, or maybe it's just a little more of what we do because we're so focused on it as a school dedicated to education for sustainability. But I'm very encouraged by the work that the district is doing. I would echo the sentiments of many people that it's extremely difficult work, and it's work that we need to continue. But when I look at our kindergarten class, or when I look at our 4 or 5 students getting ready to go to middle school, I'm incredibly heartened by what I feel is a very high level of preparation to engage in important conversations. Our goal, if we're going to create a sustainable and just and desirable future, is to train our students to be advocates and activists, and we feel okay with that. So they're coming your way, and they're going to want to have those tough conversations, and they're going to want to engage, and they're going to want to play and sing and dance and do all those kinds of things because they're kids. But bottom line, they're growing up with a very heightened awareness of what it means to be a citizen in a truly global community. And I think for all of our students, that's a very wonderful gift, and we should support it. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. Anyone else at this point? Seeing no other people who would like to speak, I will call an end to public comment. At this point, I would ask if there are any board members who would like to reflect on anything that they've heard tonight in public comment. I would like to make one comment in particular to everybody who's come to talk about co-curriculars. I have put together, I have been the finance chair, and I have put together the agenda for next Tuesday's finance meeting, and on the agenda will be a discussion of the 15% cut, and ideally we will be hearing from the administration the steps they've taken, what they've looked at, what they've been able to identify so far. So that will be next Tuesday. The meeting is at 7 o'clock at 150 Colchester Ave, which is the Ira Allen building, where the school offices are.
To clarify.
Meredith.
You're talking about both athletics and.
Yeah, it is the athletic and co-curricular. Thank you, yes.
Just make one
Yeah, Patrick.
comment too, that for those who have been a part of, our discussion here is like, okay, we're cutting at administrative level, cutting teachers, and share the poverty, not share the wealth, that we wanted to cut at all levels. And there's a logic behind it, and a logic that I agree with. The concern I know that several of us voiced was like, okay, we're cutting 15%, but we really don't know what we're cutting. And I appreciate the folks from hockey, and honestly, I've learned more from you guys about what's actually going to be cut than from anyone else, or what's been proposed for cutting, I should say, than anyone else. And I appreciate being here. I don't know if anything's going to change, but putting a face on the issue so that we can see the impact of the kids and the families, and how they're going to be impacted by whatever may happen down the line. And I won't say more.
Thank you. Seeing no other reflections at this time would also be the time for the board report. Typically at this point, I would try to bring forward or ask board members to bring forward items that they would like to bring forward. There could be a notification of something going on in a school that you're aware of, someone or something you would like to highlight. I did not come tonight prepared to put any kind of board report together, but if there are items that people would like to bring to our attention, we would love to hear them now. Keith?
The Lincoln essay was a contest that the largest number of students at Edmonds Middle School engaged in, and one of our students, one of my constituents, has won prize, and there will be a celebration tomorrow at the EMS library, 9 to 10 o'clock. And the question that he wrote on, as well as many other students, is civil discourse necessary in civil society? Sometime, always, never. Support your position. I think their comments are going to be excellent, and I invite everybody that is able to attend tomorrow at 9 o'clock. And Linda, I just want to notify you that I will not be at the cafe tomorrow at 9. I'll be at Edmonds Middle School Library listening to our students.
I'm just going to come down the.
I just wanted to ask.
Oh, go ahead.
Do you want to say who the student is who won that
I do.
award?
I just forgot his first name. You probably
Isaac
know.
Dodson?
Yes.
Isaac.
Yes.
And I was wondering if, given the fact that that topic is very timely for the board overall, I don't know, I think it's a 500-word essay. I just thought it would be nice if we could invite him because it's a really big deal. He won $1,000.
Wow.
I will put that down. And I would also.
I don't know if he can read it, you know. It's hard for me to remember how, it probably can be read.
I would like to point out that the staff in the program at Edmonds has been extremely strong. We not only have won this year, Edmonds won 2 years ago, and last year we also had someone who was, I think, an honorable mention candidate. So this program, writing this essay, it's a program that this essay writing program at Edmonds is extremely strong and something to be noted.
And there were other kids who placed as well.
Yeah, wow.
Yeah.
I just wanted to make an announcement for anyone who isn't aware of this, that April is National Autism Month, and that at this point, 1 in 88 people are diagnosed with autism. It's a growing population in our schools. I'm not aware of any specific things that schools are doing in relation to this, but I would welcome anyone else who knows what might be going on in the schools to offer that, and also to think about that throughout the month if there are opportunities to think about our children in the schools who have autism and what we are doing to serve them best.
Thank you. Yes, Linda.
Are we going to have a chance to comment after the diversity and equity report on that report?
Absolutely, we
Okay,
will. The report
I'll
will be
hold my
given.
comments.
Okay, yeah, and there'll be time for comment and questions, yes. Anyone else? I would just like to breathe a sigh of relief for all seniors who have, for the most part, just figured out pretty much where they're going to be going to school. I heard lots of great things coming out of the high school, so that's all I'll do is just offer up a sigh of relief. At this,
Do we have any news from our students?
would either of our students like to comment on what they're thinking of doing next year?
Don't have to.
You don't have to, but I would welcome. We would welcome the opportunity to hear, if you like.
Well, notwithstanding a reply from Oberlin, I've been waitlisted there, but I think I'm going to be heading to Bard College in near Annandale on Hudson in New York.
Great.
I'm deciding between Tufts and McGill. I had several acceptances that I was pretty excited about, and those are my two top schools right now.
Great. Both Peter and Emily have been on the board for 2 years now. That's correct. And well, obviously, a few more months, but congratulations. It's a huge step in life, and it's great to hear such great reports.
Thank you.
Anyone else on the board at this point?
I just want to say the announcements came out today for kids participating in the Vermont MIDI project, which is a composing project for kids from throughout the state. There were 104 kids across the state who submitted pieces online. 28 of them were accepted across the state, and close to 10 of those, I think 8 of those, were from Burlington, either from Champlain or Edmonds Elementary, and there may have been others in other schools that I'm just not aware of. And they will have their pieces performed live up Derby Line on the 1st of May. So.
And you said primarily out of Edmonds and Champlain. Do you know
The ones that I'm familiar with.
Oh, yeah, okay.
It's the ones that I'm familiar with, yeah.
So
There may be others across the district, but 27 statewide.
Right, and I was just trying to remember if we could, congratulations to the music teachers as well who have really supported this program well.
Yep. I know that Betsy Green has been very supportive of it for the last number of years.
Thanks.
I have a question, Alan.
Yes.
Sort of goes to the form that you sent us to fill out, and maybe it's coming up in Jeannie's report, I don't know, but you're asking us for times when we can't meet in April. Is there, and yet there was a meeting that was out there that we were supposed to be attending on April 8th, I think it was. Is there going to be an update about whether or not that's happening and if it's actually a board planning event? And
Yeah, that was separate from the board planning event for the year. That is a continuation of the work that we did, I think, with Daniel Barron.
I thought it was presented as our board formation
And it
night.
is, I guess, visioning, but Daniel's facilitating the meeting, correct? So it will be an opportunity to begin this work, so yes, that meeting is still on the schedule.
And can you confirm when that is again?
I'll do that in my report.
And at this point, I would ask.
You go to me first.
Oh, okay, am I skipping?
And I'll let you, no, you're not.
Oh,
but if I
okay,
could
I got you, okay. So at this point, we're going to have the equity and inclusion report, and Superintendent Collins, please help
Thank you.
lead this in for us. Thank you.
I am really pleased to announce the release tonight of the first annual Equity Inclusion Report. I do want to point out that while this is the first annual and the draft report came out in the fall, this report still reflects data from last school year. The draft report was 10-11, this report is 11-12, and we intend to get into a February annual report, but that would, so 12-13 data will be out next winter. Even though it is last year's data, and therefore some of the changes that we put in place with this year's strategic plan haven't yet taken place at the time of this data, it is an excellent baseline report that shows us a snapshot of where we were in 2011-12. I have to pause and figure out my years. And the recommendations, the highlights within that report and the recommendations within that report will guide us on where we need to go as we rewrite the strategic plan for this coming year, which will take place later this spring. This report has been a major topic of conversation over the last 6 weeks in the schools. You heard a couple of the administrators speak to that. We have gone around and Paul Sparks, Nikki, and Linda Walsh-Laban have gone around to all schools except for Smith. They were canceled because of the snow day, and they'll be doing it next week. Looking at the report, looking at the data, looking at what's coming out of it. I do want to take a moment to thank in particular Paul Irish, along with the advisory committee, but in particular Paul. Paul and Dan Ballon worked closely together from last May on, or last June on this report, released the draft report in November, and with the loss of Dan this early winter, Paul took the entire thing on his shoulders, continuing to work with the advisory committee, but wordsmithing along with the data report, et cetera, and it has been phenomenal, a phenomenal amount of work for him. And I'd like to, even before we present the report, I'd like to ask the board to acknowledge the work of Paul if we could. Paul has taken this work very, very much to heart, and all you have to do is enter a conversation with him about data on race versus poverty, and you'll know just how deeply he is committed to looking at racism and other inequities within the school district, and I thank him for that. So again, I'm back to being pleased to present the first annual Equity Inclusion Report. The intention is that this report does become an annual event, an annual report, that our data is very transparent. Some of the issues that we identified in the draft report do still exist, such as the fact that not all of our data systems are really good yet. For example, in our behavioral data reports, suspensions are defined differently at different schools. It's not defined differently by the state, however, so therefore, one of the indications of this report is we need to clean up and make more consistent what our own data is telling us. In addition to that, I'm going to let Paul talk about the highlights that are actually within the report, and again, we'll be using the recommendations as we rewrite the strategic plan later this spring. If I may ask Paul to present.
Thank you. I'll speak loudly. I think I can be heard. Can you hear me in the back? Okay. I'm Paul Irish, and as Jeannie noted, I want us all to remember that as we think about this report, that it would not be as good as it is without the efforts of Dan Ballon, and this report is dedicated to him. The charge of the board in May 2012 was for the administration to collect and analyze and create a report, and an advisory council provide recommendations to the administration. And the goal over the next 5 years to significantly reduce race, ethnicity, class, ability, sex, gender, and sexual orientation as predictors of academic performance, discipline, and co-curricular participation. The work of the advisory council was critical. They spent 40 hours over 10 months just in meetings, discussing the content, suggestions for improvements, a lot of help with formatting, editing, suggestions, and work that supported this report. And looks like the screen's a little bit large. The bottom row is cut off, but those are the people who participate in the advisory council. One of the first things we did is to define the mission. We added a little bit of language. We looked at language background, and we talked about what we would assess. So in the pilot report, which came out in October 2012, as Jeannie mentioned, that was the 2010-2011 school year. We had a huge number of measures. We trimmed it down, tuned it up a little bit for this report. This report's coming out in April 2013. The data for this report was completed before we did the first pilot report. The school year was done. So by the time this report has come out, this year is 3/4 over. So the opportunity to make change was a challenge, but many of the schools started making changes last May. A couple of the things, standardized test performance, that's pretty straightforward, the kneecap test. Gateway courses. We are defining these as courses that students would typically take if they wanted to be competitive in college, so biology, geometry, algebra 2. We looked at the 4-year cohort graduation. Those are students who started in the district as freshmen, and what percentage of them graduate 4 years later. With our populations, we have a fair number of kids who take 5 years and a few more that take 6 years, but we looked at the 4-year cohort. Under climate and inclusion, we looked at continuous enrollment. If a student was enrolled 90% of each year for 3 years continuously, or 90% of each year for 5 years in a row, those were two measures. It's kind of a longevity in the district. I don't know if that's the right word, but we call it continuous enrollment. Attendance rate is the percentage of the days you attend divided into the percentage of days you're enrolled. So if you have a 95% attendance rate and you're enrolled for the entire school year, it means you missed 8 days or fewer. So 95% attendance rate is a pretty high bar because many places consider 10 days as the starting point for truancy letters or concerns about students' attendance. Suspension rate is if a student got suspended once in school or once out of school, then they were counted. Doesn't matter how many times they were suspended, we're counting the rate of suspensions by student, not the count of suspensions. And after-school program participation, we have a significant number of after-school programs. We looked at participation at all levels. And the last part there under district resources, we looked at faculty and staff demographics and hiring. I'm sorry that screen is a little bit off on that projector. We continue to see gaps. These are the most significant ones. Whether or not they match national standards isn't really germane to what we want to do. We want to know how we're doing and what we can do better for our kids. We don't really want to hold ourselves up to the rest of the country and say we're doing okay. I think we can do better. I know we can do better. This is Vermont. Achievement gaps, low income. We've seen that in this district for a number of years. That was why we had the task force in 2006 that created the magnet schools to reduce the socioeconomic gap. We're seeing achievement gaps in race, ethnicity, English language learners, and in ability with students with IEPs. A little more troubling is the suspension rate gap. And as J. Diaz mentioned, that is a concern because it's kind of a double whammy. When you're out of school, you are also not learning. So we see gaps with low income, race, ethnicity, students with IEPs, and with male students, where they are being suspended at a rate greater than you would predict by their demographics. And although we're getting better, there is still a staffing gap. Our non-white representation is not equivalent to the demographics of our student body. It's significantly better than it was last year, but these are continue to be gaps that we're looking at. A couple of comments. We didn't really expect a lot of change between the pilot report and this report because the data had already been put in the books. However, we have noted that their programs have been implemented since May to address some of these concerns, and we want to take a look at these programs. Some of them, for example, there are double-dose math classes at the high school. We've created a data sharing program with the after-school partners so that if students are having difficulty in mathematics, the after-school programs can start to align their programs to work on that. We're looking at positive behavior system processes. We've implemented those in all the elementary schools. You heard one of the principals talk about SWIS, the data process that looks at behavior. We're looking at what we're doing now, what things are working, what ideas we might have to do better, and also what other schools might be doing. So we're continuing to focus on these issues. The key of this report were 6 recommendations to the district administration. You heard Jeannie talk about how she expects it to be integrated into the strategic planning. So the 6 areas, we want to look at the academic achievement gap, look at the current programs that are working, and pilot new programs specifically designed to address this gap. The behavior and suspension gap. Suspension is the end of a long process. That might start with classroom behavior, it might start with office referrals, but there's a long chain of processes before a student is suspended. Are there systems that are creating inequitable results for our students? Looking specifically at parental engagement and systems to increase parental engagement where they're not currently being engaged with the schools. We think about student academic achievement. I like to think of a 3-legged stool: a teacher, a student, and a parent, or a committed adult in that student's life. And if you take one of those legs away, the stool has trouble standing up. So what sort of programs do we currently have for parental engagement? We need to change how we think about them. We have homeschool liaisons for the new American families. What sort of other things do we have that we could look at? Connections with external programs. I mentioned a little bit about how we might create intentional connections between the after-school programs and the academic achievement needs of some of our students. So we'll continue to look at that. The 5th recommendation is professional development. And you heard several of the principals talk about some of the things they were doing with their staffs from pre-K through high school already this year to address the professional development needs. Again, focusing on needs and practices to improve results for our at-risk students. And the last one is important for the administration and the board. It's to look at resources. What sort of adjustments, increases, reallocations do we need to align with these identified needs as part of our annual and program budget procedures? So these are the 6 recommendations that the report presents to the administration. We've already started on some of the next steps. The building and district administrators, we've engaged at every school with faculty discussions, and I would really like to thank Nikki Fuller and Sparks and Linda Walsleben for their support as we go around and talk to faculty about what are we doing, what can we do better, and engaging them in these kinds of discussions. It's been a real rich discussion. A lot of great ideas are coming out of that. We're going to continue the professional development planning with the Equity Council. That's a group specifically targeted for looking at professional development on the issues of race and inclusion in the district. And as district administrators, central office administrators, and principals, I expect we're going to be focusing our administrative discussions about how we integrate these recommendations into all of our work next year. For the Advisory Council, tomorrow we're going to start working on the 2012-2013 report. We're going to look at some additional data points, the climate survey of the students and the faculty this year. We're going to start looking at some postgraduate success results, in other words, what happens to students when they go off to college. We're going to start having enough data points to do some trend analysis. We're going to look at a growth model. We're actually collaborating with a UVM graduate statistics program to do some longitudinal analysis, 3 or 4 year cohort studies on different pieces of data. And then we have a target report date of February 2014. So the report is on the website. There should be a link in your email and a link off one of the sides of the web page. There are 2 pieces. One is the full formal report. That's sort of a complete synopsis. It has all the definitions, the references, the recommendations. And then there is a web page with a lot of additional detail, all of the charts that we use to generate the findings. So the whole report is about 30 pages. It would have been about 60 pages if we put all those other charts in it. But all that information is there. And there is an email address if you'd like to read it, send any comments to help the Advisory Council with their next steps. And that's my report, if there's any comments or questions.
Thank you very much, Paul. At this point, I guess I would look to the board for questions or comments. And I know, Linda, you had said you wanted to ask something or bring something up.
I have, as you know, ongoing concerns about a particular population, which is kids who are not living with their families, and we keep referring to them as family input or parental input. And there are over 250, between 250 and 300 kids in Burlington who are not living with their parents. And these are not kids in DCF custody, but they are an invisible population living with grandparents, aunts and uncles, coaches, whoever. And although they are included when we talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion, we are not keeping data on them. And yet when we get to the On Top program, we find most of the kids in On Top are kids who are living with grandparents and other relatives. So somewhere along the line, we're not tracking them, and they're still ending up, they're very at risk, and we're not catching them. You're looking at me, Paul, like you don't know what I mean.
I'm just paying attention to that. So these are
children who are living with relatives.
Yep.
They have been impacted by usually mental health issues, substance abuse, incarceration. They're not living with their parents, but they're not in DCF custody. And there are a significant number of them. There are 5,000 in the state, so I figure there got to be about a couple hundred of them in Burlington, just easily. These kids are very at risk, as at risk as some of the more visible populations, but they're invisible. And we're not tracking them. By not tracking them, they remain invisible. Okay, and extremely at risk. And yet the outcomes, when we look at the other end, no one would say that a child ending up On Top is a good outcome, in the sense that those kids have had real challenges. And why aren't we, I think that's a group we need to figure out a way to track.
Linda, could I just ask you a couple of questions? Because I think if I remember what was in sort of the idea of what it would be that we would make sure that these are not indicators of performance. You're asking for us to track an additional or bring an additional class into this. And I think there's also a question, can we track the data? And if you're asking us to track the data, or the administration, would that be a fair way of characterizing partly what you've said?
Because, again, these are kids who have been impacted and are very at risk.
Right.
Okay? But they're not visibly at risk. In other words, they're not special ed, Not necessarily are we picking them up on the free and reduced lunch count. They should be. But if nobody knows about them, they're just living with grandma, then they're not getting the free and reduced lunch they're entitled to, and we would be then tracking them. And they're not, it's not a race or an ethnic issue.
Jeannie,
Okay.
did you want to comment on something?
Jeannie and I have had this conversation, and I'm going to continue to be a burr in everybody's side because I think we're missing a large group. This is not a small group of kids.
Yeah, I think Linda and I have had this conversation on a very personal level.
Yeah.
And yeah, we have had, and it might be a conversation, once again, that diversity equity needs to pick up. There isn't a formal way of tracking these kids. It would be a voluntary answer to a question on an application by parents. What that question is, maybe we could jointly design. And again, it would be voluntary, but as Linda points out, if we are able to identify these students, we're also able, if the parents or the caregivers don't realize it, we're also able to tell them about access to services they may not be aware these kids have that are very beneficial.
Well, and also, we need to sort of keep an eye on them, as we do keep an eye on kids who are already known risk factors, and if we see them slipping, we put in more services. Right now, because this population is invisible, we're not tracking them, and we're not putting the services in, and we don't know the answers that the questions Paul's asking about. Why are they falling apart? Or Brian's saying, we aren't even considering those questions.
Right.
Okay? My main concern is that they are invisible, and they shouldn't remain invisible, being that they're a sizable number.
Yeah. And I hope you hear the challenge of hopefully
Absolutely.
finding a way to
And again,
bring
it
a
has to be a
class like this.
voluntary
Yes.
tracking, because there is no requirement of parents or caregivers to disclose this, but certainly there's some way that we could design some type of question on a registration form and collect the information.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I would like to include that in the next go-round for statistics, because I think it would be of interest for us to be tracking.
Meredith is next, and then
I just
Mary?
wanted to follow up because I know I've had many conversations with Linda about this, and she's made us aware of that on the board, and thank you.
I'm not going to give up.
Because you're a retired teacher, and we rely on you on all kinds of information. But I do want to. I guess it's almost like free and reduced lunch, where I know a lot of people who could sign up for that, but they don't. And so it's, once again, to me, I think you're totally right. You have to, figure out who that population is, because you have to rely on someone to give you that information. And from there, and my feeling is that has got to be enormously complex because of all the agencies outside of the schools that are involved in their lives, and
or not, and maybe should be.
Right, and so it sounds big.
Yeah,
But I think the first idea is to
I'd like to
collect
raise
the
the
information.
visibility of
Right,
them,
right.
first of all, yeah.
But thank you for bringing that to our attention.
Well, I'll keep bringing it up.
Is that?
Yep.
Aaron?
I guess I just want to comment on how blown away I am by the gender demographic in terms of special education and.
She's going.
Sick cat at home.
Sure.
I'm sorry, what was that?
I have a sick cat at home and a
Got hit by a
husband
car.
who can't handle it, and I'm supposed to be leaving a baby with him in about 4 months. But anyway. Anyway, I just wanted to comment on how blown away I was by the statistics on page 21 of the lower number of the percentage of females versus males when it comes to IEPs, 504s. And I guess I'm just not sure where to even go with that, because as a teacher, I do see that my female students are way overachieving my male students. And I've actually had a conversation, and I hope he doesn't mind me bringing this up, but Arshad, and I do not know his last name, he teaches at UVM, but he does a lot of research on specifically boys of color and how they perform in school, and how he's seeing at the UVM level that they're still underperforming. And is it because we're feminizing education and it's no longer cool, you know, for boys to be doing well in school? And I'm totally dumbing this down and not using the best way to say that. But anyway, I just wanted to, I mean, I don't know what to do about, you know, it's sort of shocking. And
Rashad Shabazz.
is it Rashad Shabazz? Okay. Yeah, I love having, we talk at the Y about lots of things, but anyway. So that's all I wanted to say. And I don't know if you have any follow-up to that, or what we're gonna do, or if there's anything to do, or if there's pilots programs or pilot studies, or.
Certainly, looking at the achievement gap is one of the things we're going to continue to look at. And the behavior gap, and as gender is strongly linked to suspensions. I think we'll be looking at some of those solutions. I would have to defer to the special educators who might say, well, this is typical that males get identified more than females as special ed students. But I don't know that from my own background. So as part of the advisory council, we're looking at what the indicators are. We're not necessarily looking at the solutions. As administration, we're going to have to say, okay, this looks skewed. What are we doing that's creating this skew? Do we look at single gender math classes that have been tried in other areas? Or, as you pointed out, are we feminizing education? Again, not the PC word, I get that, but a lot of stuff to look at, and that's one of the key areas.
Yeah, that's all.
Miriam?
I have a bit of a follow-up on that. It is a national trend that, in fact, you will see a split like this in special education around gender nationally. So it's not a unique thing to Burlington. One of the things that's interesting is that when you're talking about special education, there are different ways and reasons people get put on a special education plan. And my guess is that what we're seeing is an increase in acting out behaviors that then get labeled emotional disturbance. So I would guess that that's where you're going to see the biggest group of boys. So that's just to answer your question. I don't have a way to respond to that. But one thing that I thought of when I read this is that I'm new, I don't know the workings of the committees, but I would hope that going forward we could involve special education, maybe even have a special education administrator as part of the key committee working on this, because it feels to me like there's room for that, and that maybe that hasn't been done before. Maybe perhaps inviting Dylan to join in.
Laura Nugent filled that role.
Right. And I know she has background in special education, but I'm thinking it might be helpful to have someone from the administration who can speak to it.
And Dylan and I are meeting next week.
Great.
To review the indications of this report, so we can start to think about it from his perspective.
Perfect. I had one other comment on another issue, and I'm not making a criticism of this report at all. I think it's super. But I do know in reading it that one of the things that pops out is the duplication in groups. So many children who are, categorized by a certain race are also categorized as free and reduced lunch, and that will vary. So when you read the report, you need to keep in mind that you're seeing these are not discrete groups. And when you look at statistics, it changes the way you interpret the data. So I guess what I would hope that maybe that could be addressed in the report, because anyone reading the report with a statistical eye would want to know, what is the meaning of this? Does it change the meaning? Perhaps it doesn't. Or if it does change the meaning, does it perhaps point us to a particular group who is particularly at risk? For example, Black African children who are on ELL, who are ELL students and free and reduced lunch. Is that the group that's really at the highest risk? And again, I don't know that's something we need in this report, but it's something that when you read the report, it makes you begin to think about. So I just put that out there as something to think about.
And I did allude to that a little bit in my presentation, that we're working with UVM, graduate statistics, to look at longitudinal analysis to see if we can really pinpoint its multivariate regression, to see if we can say, okay, it is really over the 5, 6, transition, there is a significant drop in free and reduced lunch scores, but the other ones seem to be staying on par. So to pull out what that fundamental piece might be. On the other hand, we don't have some significant amount of behavioral data that we can do that with. So we have to really be investigating our own actions and thinking about what we're doing and what we can see and how that plays out in our results.
No, I understand statistics aren't the whole picture, but it's a question that comes up when you read the report. Just another paragraph or two explaining that that is in fact an issue and how that might affect the data would be my suggestion.
Keith? Following up on that, and talking with Dylan, he was saying that among our ELL students, depending on which country they've come from and the particular situation in that country, whether it was a war-torn or just sort of a unsettled society, some of our students have issues with mental health versus other students who come from countries that they've just left because of political reasons, whatever, but they've had some good educational background. I think part of the maybe the percentages of students who are on educational plans, IEP plans, might have to do with the fact that they may be some issues related to their background and their culture from when they came from. If you come from a war-torn situation or a refugee camp or a situation where things are not you haven't had a very good situation, a very safe situation, that's going to impact your ability to come into a new school in a new country. And I thought I was hoping we'd get some breakdown on what that impact is, because that's going to be helpful for us in getting support for ELL students. I think at the state level, if we talk about not only their needs to learn the language, they also have needs in the mental health area.
I made a note of that. The indications in this report are that ELL students are identified at a much lower rate for special ed services, and we don't know why that is, if it's a language barrier or...
My experience is that they don't necessarily get, because of their ELL status, they don't necessarily get the other status, so or label, whatever. But I think it's really important to look at the numbers who might have issues related to PTSD or whatever the issues are related to their background.
Liz?
Thanks. I just wanted to thank everybody who worked on this report. For me, I have a particular interest as someone who sat on the Diversity and Equity Task Force, and so I feel like a certain affinity with the report and a lot of the work that's been done, and I know that it was a really difficult time for everybody involved, and I really admire that people plugged through it and really were committed to producing it. So I just want to express that, and my comments are not in any way criticism. I just have a number of concerns about the report. The first concern I have is that there was a tremendous amount of turmoil with Dan's death, and so I'm just worried that there was a focus on a deadline rather than a commitment to take this to the level where I think it still needs to go. And somebody explained to me the difference between proficiency versus, I think it was Eugenie, the Carnegie hours. And so I'm a little concerned that there's a reflection of Carnegie hours here rather than really creating a baseline that we need to move forward. And I do think that we have an incomplete picture. I think we have a lot of great data here. I think it really tells us a lot. And I think it's data that's going to be already expressed. It's very useful to, obviously, our school personnel. However, I almost think it's too much data. In some ways, I think this report is useful to the district staff, personnel, and to some extent, board members who are more focused on this issue. But in terms of a board level document, an external document, and maybe that's not what it's supposed to be, maybe I'm misunderstanding it, it's not a board level document. But in terms of a document that's going to be presented to the public, I think, at least in my mind, what we were trying to establish through the Equity Task Force recommendations was that we would have a baseline for indicators that could be established and then measured every year, and that it's not intended to be a picture that changes every year, gets massaged every year, gets kind of moved around and developed every year, although there will be data sets that do change every year, but essentially, I think what we need is what proportion of the student body are black and what's their rate of suspension compared to their proportion of the student body. Boom. What's the proportion of free and reduced lunch kids in proportion to the student body, and what's their proportion of the rate of cohort graduation rate? Boom. So it's like we just need those demographics as a proportion of the student body versus what proportion are they in these indicators of achievement. And that would tell us in 5 years, black kids are 13% of the student body, but they're disproportionately represented in, out of school suspensions or whatever indicator you're going to choose. And so in 5 years, we need to be able to say, well, they're this proportion of the student body, but we've reduced the proportion that they represent of the kids who are suspended. So those are kind of very solid indicators that you can track over time from year to year. They don't change, and they don't allow confusion as you move forward. And I've heard people say that we want to be a data-driven body, and if we're going to be a data-driven body, we need a set of data that is baseline data that won't change. All of the other data that supports it or that you analyze to arrive at that conclusion will change, hopefully, for the better. But the baseline picture shouldn't change. So that's my overriding concern. And as a document we're putting out to the public, we want to say, this is what we're measuring, and in 5 years you can come back and you'll see those same measurements, and you'll see how we've improved or not improved. What we do to change what we're doing is all, staff decision and, hopefully works, but we need to be able to say in 5 years, did that indicator change? It's got to be the same indicator. So that's my overwhelming concern. I wish I could read my notes, but I don't have my glasses. So I just want to, I just want to thank you again, and just for the record, I think it's incomplete. One thing that might help is a dashboard. Like if you could do, the other point I wanted to make is that my other concern is that it was presented to school district staff and in the schools as a complete report, but that just feels like the process was a little cart before the horse. But I guess what would be great is if there could be a dashboard that just has those very basic indicators that we are going to come back to every year, the same ones. They're not going to change. We're not going to add to them. We're not going to do anything different. And that dashboard might be an opportunity then to say to the public, here's what we set out to do, and here's where we are. Thank you.
Paul, did you want to speak to that at all?
No, I think this is the first one, and certainly making a dashboard or things like that makes perfect sense to me. So I think there are at least 3 members of the advisory council sitting in the audience. I know they're listening and taking notes, and I'm taking notes too, so that'll be part of our next steps.
And if I could add to that too, the intention is exactly that. It is we identified indicators, both through the mission of the people on the advisory committee, and those are the indicators that will be tracked over time, but there is no over time in this first report. It's a first report. So over time, we'll be tracking the same indicators in order to itself to see what progress or lack of progress we're making.
Well, if I may, again.
Yes.
I guess to that point, I know it's been brought up over and over that there's a missing indicator, the cohort dropout rate. And I'm sure you have reasons for that. I know members of the advisory committee were concerned about that, and so I brought it up earlier to the Diversity and Equity Committee, and I think there was an attempt to include it. What's inconsistent is that we're not seeing a consistent methodology of saying this number of students represents this proportion of the student body, and then represents this proportion of the kids who are in the cohort dropout. So there's not a consistent methodology throughout the report. So I was thinking the dashboard could offer a consistent methodology to show that proportion and how it changes or doesn't change.
Emily and then Jill.
So I guess I'm wondering what the plan is in general for improving our data collection methods in several, I mean, there's been several different comments about where there's holes in terms of what data we're collecting. And my understanding of the report card and the work of the committee was to not only look at what data do we already have and compile it, but also look at what data are we not collecting right now and how are we going to start collecting it. And so there's a section on recommendations for the district, but there's not a section on recommendations kind of to the committee itself and to the district to where do we need to start collecting data. So Linda's comment about kids who aren't living with their parents, Keith's comment about breakdown of where new American students are coming from. One of the specific factors that the mission seeks to significantly reduce as a predictor of academic success is sexual orientation. But as far as I know, I mean, it's not in their report, and I don't think the district has that data really accessible right now. So I'm sure in the committee, a lot of holes came up and were very apparent, and that those discussions were had. But I would love to see some proposals of where that data is going to start being collected, because it's stuff we need. We need to see it. So how are we going to change what we're collecting to make that available?
Paul or Jeannie, did you want to make any comments to that, or?
That's a continuing question. What are the next data points that we want to collect? One of them I mentioned was the climate survey. We had hoped to have something on that, but it just didn't come to pass. Postgraduate, some data may not be possible to collect easily. Voluntarily describing your sexual orientation. The other question about the work we have to do, there are some really big pieces of work to move forward on, some glaring gaps, and when we look at resources and allocation of that, in my mind, I think we need to start looking at the actions that we're taking at the school level. So we're really focusing on what teachers and administrators can do to improve those really big gaps. And hopefully in the process of doing that work, if we look 2 years down the road at some of these other things that have been mentioned, and we're still seeing issues and work to address that. So partly it's a matter of resources, partly it's a matter of the amount of data we could collect and the ways we could collect it. The dropout rate, for example, is collected by the state. And they report on it, but they report on it a year prior. So their 10-11 dropout data, and going back many years, is available, and they disaggregate it by all the same pieces. So there's just there's a lot of stuff that we could collect. So I made some notes. Certainly the advisory council, we talk about what is the best data to represent the domains we're looking at. One thing that we need to work on better is the co-curricular area. We had a lot of difficulty getting quality co-curricular data. It just comes from so many different sources. It takes a lot of legwork to get it. If that's really valuable data, or the data for the after-school programs, our partners, what's the participation rate in the Boys and Girls Club? We have it for all of our internal after-school programs. We don't have it for the Boys and Girls Club, King Street Center. So what data is going to give us the biggest bang for our resource dollar? And then we need to turn that into action. So that's sort of my perspective on it.
Jill?
We've had lots of conversations in the Diversity and Equity Committee. I've had lots of conversations maybe with myself at that meeting. But I will be bringing it up at our next meeting. I have concerns about the report as well, even to the point of who owns it and whether or not, I mean, what I understand is that the board, so out of what I think is that, our role is to create the vision for equity and inclusion, our role, speaking of the board, and that another role is to monitor the progress towards that vision. So we're talking about the achievement gap. It was through the report of the task force that the recommendation for a report card, equity report card, came, and that started happening well in advance of Jeannie creating her strategic plan. I'm told, and I haven't gone back and read through minutes, but I'm told that the board voted to appoint members of a subcommittee that would be actually an advisory group to Jeannie and the administration. I might have been confused. I thought we were voting for that to be a subcommittee of the task force, but I've been told in the diversity and equity meetings that that's not the case. So I have an intention of bringing that back up in conversation with the new chair and in that committee, because I think that that is part of the problem. I really agree with what Miriam is saying, in that we have heard some from Sparks and Nikki about how the staff in the district are receiving the report and the data, and there's some fear and that kind of thing. And I think because it's way too much data. I mean, it's good data because we need data, but to a lay person, it's too many numbers, and the numbers aren't discrete enough. And where people run with what that means, I think, is potentially more destructive, or can be more destructive than helpful in terms of being divisive. So I really think that this was a tool that we as a board asked for through that process so that we could monitor the progress. And I feel like the board needs to have more of a collaborative relationship and dialogue with what it looks like. I think it's a great start, and I know that the committee, I've heard at our committee that the membership on that committee sort of waned. So I don't, it's hard to have a full sense of how fully engaged all the different people were. But I have talked to a few of the members, and they shared with me that their experience was that they might have been making recommendations or had thoughts, and it was sort of like the district's decision whether or not to incorporate that or to use it. And that's a little bit concerning for me as well, because I thought that this was really going to be about transparency. And so for those reasons, I welcome anybody to come to the Diversity and Equity Committee this month, because I am going to try to bring it back up again anyway for conversation. And I don't know where we go from here, because it is the first report based on whatever decision-making and leadership we had, and it is supposed to be the baseline, and I think you're right. I think it isn't the baseline we want. I think the baseline we want is a little more pithy, a little more specific about what it's telling us, and if it is, we are supposed to be using the baseline to do exactly the same every year out, and I don't think that this report is a good enough tool for that. So, I mean, how did it go to the schools before even the Diversity and Equity Committee had a chance to see it or give feedback on it? That the whole process thing drives me crazy. I don't understand it, but I'm bringing it back up.
Patrick.
I see the value of dashboard, I think is a term that you used, and maybe something a bit more pithy. I do see the value going forward in that. To add even more work, please don't lose the depth that's here too. I find that, personally, to be able to dig a little bit deeper into the numbers, that to be nice, and that we know, I can see where that came from.
Patrick, I'm sorry.
But not to lose the, okay, so maybe expanded executive summary. That really is something that can be a report card that's a checkoff. But not to lose, I think there's a lot of value in to me personally, in being able to dig a little bit more deeper into the numbers that are in the body of the report. And I think I just want to make sure we don't lose that in getting a report card. I absolutely see the value of that.
Sorry, it's that.
No, it's all right.
Is that it, Patrick?
That's all.
Okay. I guess I would just like to comment and say to the district and to people involved in the report, and I think
everyone who's now responsible for looking at this and identifying where we're going to move forward and how we move forward in the end, I'm going to say that I think that a report like this takes a fair amount of courage on the district's part. We do open ourselves up to many forms of criticism and review, which include how come this group of kids aren't doing so well? How come that group of kids aren't doing so well? And all of these kind of questions, and yet we wanted to have this report so that we could identify and go after these things. So I see that taking this to the staff, and they're opening themselves up as well to this sort of, to the work that's going to come behind this, does take a fair amount of, as I said, courage. And I also think that we have the other form of questions that we've heard tonight that I think also we need to address. How do we, is this getting to the goals we wanted? And are there classes of kids that are not being captured here? And a good number of other questions. And to the board, I guess I would like to remind you the following is that the charge is that the board does appoint this committee. The second part of it is that board members are supposed to be part of this committee, and ideally people were going to go for 2-year terms. And the 2 board members who had input on this and were involved were myself and Paul. And Paul has now left the board. I am encouraging him to stay involved, but I'm not sure that he will. But to the board members, there he is in the back, sorry. My contacts are completely dried out. I can't see much past Catherine Chasen's sign here right now. But there is to be board presence on this, and I would encourage you maybe to make a note on the questionnaire that I've sent out if this is something you are interested in as well. And I guess I would just like to say again, thank you to Paul and to the entire team. There was a lot of staff work of people who are not listed in this report, who also put a fair amount of time into, as well as the teaching staff who have been looking at this already. And just, as a final comment, I too would like to express as much gratitude as I can to all the work that Dan did surrounding this and many other events within the district. And I think Dan's shadow is one that I hope keeps us, is a reminder to us for years to come on efforts such as this. Thank you all.
Alan, do you have any extras
Aaron.
of those? Any extras of those surveys? We ran out down here.
Did I leave, is there an extra one down on that end?
I wonder if we could ask the people who served on this committee to stand and be recognized.
Yeah, if folks who could, because I see a number of committee members, if you could all stand as well and be acknowledged.
Many hours, many hours.
And again,
Starting again tomorrow night.
Starting again tomorrow.
And Alan, I just want to say
Jill.
that my comments, like Liz's, I don't mean that what we have today, because of all those hours that all of those people volunteered and put in, is unimaginable, thinking where we were a year ago, wondering if we would have anything like this. And so the fact that I have concerns or thoughts about how it's the process through which it gets approved and how it could be improved, I don't want that to undermine the huge amount of effort and how much I personally and the board and the Diversity and Equity Subcommittee appreciate it. I just hope we can look at it as something that's in progress, not done.
Great, thanks. At this point, Jeannie, I turn it over to you for the superintendent's report.
Yes, I have a 2-hour presentation.
Do you okay, so I would ask for a reset. We'll come back tomorrow night.
Thank you. I'll start with our diversity equity update, actually. And beyond what you've just heard, beyond the equity inclusion report, I do want to point out that the climate survey is underway. The climate survey development, is underway. Sparks and Jeff Fournier are leading that charge with some advisory committee members. Later this month, administrators will be receiving information or a visit from Brown University to give us feedback on their first audit of our ELL programs at the secondary school level. And we also have completed the ELL services survey, which I will be bringing to the next diversity equity meeting to share feedback from teachers and students in Burlington schools about ELL services in our schools. Recently, we did have a meeting with our Parents for Change, New American Parents, to revisit the commitments that were made in November, the progress that has been made thus far in those commitments, and identify the next steps on those commitments. And at the moment, we're still kind of gathering feedback on that particular meeting, and I believe that a press release will be written up for transparency once that information is gathered. I'm wondering if I could ask Sparks to speak to what's happening in this room tomorrow night? It's not in this room. Then I wonder if he could tell us where to go tomorrow night?
Yes, we will be in the gym. It's the 8th annual Shades of Ebony multicultural celebration of foods. Last year we had over 250 people, so we expect a bigger crowd this year. So it's a fantastic community event, fantastic school event, and look forward and hope you guys can attend.
I do, I second that. Yeah.
Sorry, Sparks, I only caught your last word.
Attend tomorrow night. Bring families, bring food. Our food services is also part of the work that we're doing around diversity and equity and including all of our families. And one of the things that they're doing here at BHS in the very near future, in the next couple of weeks, is hosting the Nepalese and Bhutanese communities to a dinner at the high school so that those communities could learn about food options that we have, pricing, free and reduced lunch options, things like that. And we plan to do that with other communities as well. We also are hosting AALV, African Americans Living in Vermont, in our kitchens, October through April. AALV sponsors a number of communal farms and will be not only purchasing produce from those farms, but also working with AALV members on cooking the produce that comes from them and creating recipes that they might then go out and raise some funds with using. In the area of equity, I wonder, Sparks, if I may turn to you once again, if you could speak very briefly about the African American Males Dinner.
Yes, last week we hosted a dinner for not only African American males, but African males as well. One of the things that we are aware of is that's one of the populations of students that's being underserved by the district. So our office is looking at ways to better support African Americans and African males as it relates to tutorial support and any other support they're going to need in order to be successful. The Gourmet Cafe hosted a nice dinner. We had over 45 people in attendance.
Nice. Wow, 45. Thank you.
Can I ask you? I know it was, in this case, it was for high school kids at that level, right? I think I
Yes.
asked you that the other night, because I think it's a fabulous idea. But the more I'm involved in the school district as a parent and seeing, and I'm in, in the most diverse school in the district, in the elementary level, I'm wondering how you tap into the parents at the, preschool, kindergarten, 1, 2, I don't know.
One of the things that we are looking at doing that Sparks is bringing forward is the idea of having an African American liaison as well.
Okay.
And we're looking at our family school partnership funding as a source to bring that position in. It's something we haven't yet done before.
And the other part of that, we consider trying to reach out to the middle schools as well. But we need to start at the high school, to start it somewhere, get it up and running, and then reach out further.
Okay.
Thank you. Sparks also did some training on harassment and bullying with our harassment and bullying policies with our athletic coaches, which is something that hasn't been done consistently previously. Nikki Fuller has been working significantly on developing an affirmative recruitment training, taking over from the cultural competency and anti-bias training that was done by CIE prior to this year. So she has provided a few trainings thus far and has developed a schedule for the remainder of the year for the hiring season coming up, because we are requiring that every faculty or staff or administrator who sits on a search committee go through the affirmative recruitment training prior to the interview process. She also is getting neck deep in our hiring process. We've had several conversations about some recommendations, possibly for changes in the future, but really want to experience a year of knowing what process has been developed. This is our 4th year of going through this process right now, and is busy reviewing positions as they become open as well. And Nikki and Sarah Jane, our HR director, attended an ART training that was hosted by, can't tell you what this acronym stands for, SHRM, Society of Human Resources Management. And we, Nikki Fuller, Sparks, and Linda Walsleben and myself spent a day with Sam Offer of Washington Consulting. He flew up for a day just with us to do some significant work around planning with us about where have we come since August, where are we headed, and we'll be working as a team towards the new strategic plan, which we plan to release once again at the beginning of June. Any questions on diversity, equity at this point? Okay. Moving on to registration, at the moment I can report that as of March 15th, we've had 276 kindergarten registrations. We're already up 10 more now, as a matter of fact. That's very high. We're hopeful that it's high because of our, we're now in our 3rd year of a push for very early kindergarten registrations, but it's also scary high. But we're watching it. I wanted to let you know that. It is really good news. I've had some questions about our attendance policy, school assignment policy, and how that plays out in elementary to middle school. As you know, our elementary schools are free choice for anybody who lives in Burlington. You can apply to any of the elementary schools. And if it's a magnet school, the criteria of getting in has to do with, I'm sorry, I don't have the policy in front of me, so I'm doing this by memory. It has to do with sibling, socioeconomic, and proximity. Well, capacity is always first, but sibling, socioeconomic, proximity. But if it's one of the 4 other schools, then it has to do with sibling, proximity, and then socioeconomic. But they're not really neighborhood schools anymore in the old sense of neighborhood schools. However, our 2 middle schools still have zones. They still have neighborhood zones. And students are told as they're entering their kindergarten years, or if they move into the district somewhere along elementary years, that you're living in a zone of a particular middle school. So right now with our 5th graders, we have gone through all of our 5th grade lists, and if a child is attending a school that's outside their middle school zone, if they're attending an elementary school that's outside their middle school zone, then the parents have received a letter stating you would need to request a variance if you wish to go to the middle school that's in the zone of the elementary school. Did I say that well? No. Okay. We do have, right now both of our middle schools are basically at the same level of enrollment for next year. The numbers are basically identical, particularly when we figure in the private school kids that come in each year. So what that really means is, just like the neighborhood schools, we would need to look at capacity, siblings, proximity, SEI. And so if there are variances requests, at this point it's pretty much a trade. If there's 5 people who want to move from the Hunt zone to the Edmonds school and 5 people want to move from the Edmonds zone to the Hunt school, we've got it made. But if we're out of balance in either area, it might be tricky. So we have sent a letter to those parents who might want to consider it. The letter does talk about the need to get variances in by later this month. We will take a first stab at making those matches as best we can in early May and let parents know in early May, plenty of time to get ready. And then we do another round of looking at that in late summer, because you could be on a waiting list for the school that you want to go to, and things change. People move, things open up. So we also have another opportunity for people.
I've reflected on this since talking about this the last few days, just because I know there's so much angst when people head into middle school. I know there are. But I just wondered if it
makes sense for all the parents to get a letter. Because on the board, we keep talking about how Edmonds, at least I do, I keep hearing that south of Main Street, we have this explosion of children, and Edmonds is just growing, and that we have fewer numbers at Hunt, and I keep repeating that out in the community. So, people may be really confused now about where they're gonna go.
Okay.
So I think they just all need to get the letter.
All right, I'll
Where
follow
you
up on
just
that.
say, this is the school right now you're assigned to, and you're welcome to file.
Right. Thank you. Any questions? Liz?
Yeah, I had a question about, this is a pretty good student body number, 3841.
Yes.
My question is more just, not for, just point of information, really, not to be answered now, but I was just interested in this number compared to the student body number that was in budget projections. And just wondering if there's any opportunity, if the budget was based on a higher student body number, an opportunity for the finance committee perhaps at its next meeting to look at that.
Sure. I can tell you that our budget projections was a stable enrollment. We don't really anticipate the increase. I can also tell you that it's a 2-year rolling ADM funding. So if we were to be up by, say, 20 students next year, the year after, we would get half of that increased ADM, and the year after, the other half. So it kind of follows along that way.
Like an 18-month thing?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Any other registration questions?
Just curious, do you have data for April 1st, 2002 for registrations?
5 o'clock this afternoon, I thought somebody's going to ask me that question, and I don't have it. But yes, I certainly can have that for you. I remember that we could pull up last year's.
You know what, I'll pull it up, that's fine, that's great. That's
I'm
exactly
very
right.
sorry. I
No,
did
no,
think of
no,
that,
that's
but
okay.
way too late. Rebecca?
I don't remember if you mentioned this at the last point, but sort of where the magnet schools are looking in terms of kindergarten registration at this point.
They are very full. Well, that's not really fair. Yes, these numbers indicate that we're already going beyond our 18 to 20 in all of our kindergartens, which is, so these are very high numbers already. I'm trying to pull up
I thought Edmonds was.
those numbers. Not sure exactly what day you gave it to me, and this isn't, oh, here it is, okay. Both magnet schools are likely to have a wait list. Both magnet schools are balanced at 50-50. There are 3 schools who have high registration numbers who are willing to start the year at 22 students with that kindergarten paraeducator in the class, because we've given the schools the choice, should every school be at the 20, but rather than putting people on a wait list and then disrupting the class later down the road, these 3 schools, which have fairly high numbers, have volunteered to start the year with the high numbers. Those schools are Champlain, Sustainability, and Integrated Arts Academy.
Thank you.
But for sustainability, it's gotta be lower than 22. Right?
Yes, Sustainability is capped at 34 students because their class size will not allow the higher number. 34 between 2 classes. Okay, move on. I do keep you informed as we go along of how those numbers change.
Can I have one more question?
Sure.
So Edmonds has 35 in kindergarten right now, so that means they do have 3 classrooms, so they will be one of the schools to absorb.
Edmonds has how many in kindergarten right now?
35 in kindergarten.
35 does not, in over 3
sounds really low
classrooms is
to
low.
me.
We're
Yeah,
just
Edmonds is low at the moment.
Yeah, that's the projection on the website.
Yeah, that would be, so I'm assuming that that's where the room is right now, because they have
Well,
three-
the other
three
3
kindergartens.
schools, the 3 who didn't go to the high numbers, all still have room at the moment.
Okay.
Plus, these numbers change, so
It's hard for
it's
me
so
to
early
remember.
that some people may change.
It's
Some
hard
people
for me
may
to
change their
remember.
minds or move, or, that kind of.
You still have, what, 29 kids that haven't enrolled yet, that are in the,
I think that data is now a little bit old. I think it's a much smaller number, and we've been tracking them down. So I know that we've
but
gained
that's just
another
a
10.
shift. I mean,
Yeah, right,
they're somewhere in the system, right?
right,
Yeah.
that's right.
I think part of why I have a hard time remembering how many classrooms there are sometimes.
Right.
I think there are 3 at Flynn.
3 at Flynn, 3 at Champlain, 3 at Smith, 3 at Edmonds.
Okay.
2 at the academies. There isn't physical space for 3. So that's a large, once again, a large kindergarten class coming through if we fill those.
And Champlain seriously can absorb that bubble.
Right now it can, because
Okay.
they have a third, fifth moving out, and so they're
Okay.
able to go back to a third. And then ITC has been discussing options for keeping Champlain at that number potentially in the future. Any other questions? I still have 90 minutes to go. Okay, I'm going to move on to Partnership for Change. As you know, hopefully by now, Hal Colston has been selected as the Director of Partnership for Change for the coming 2 to 5 years. We're very excited to have him on board. There was a rigorous search process. He comes with a great deal of background and community building, and I think just the fact that he even applied for the position is a wonderful vote of confidence in the work that we're doing. So we're very excited to have him on board. We are still in the process of finalizing the fellow hirings. Sarah Bertucci, I believe, is the fellow who's remaining in her position because she's focused on the proficiencies, and it's not a good time to make a change in that one. But the other fellow positions are up, and interviews are underway. Last week, Keith, myself, Julie, some others from Burlington, some fellows from Burlington, and some others from Winooski School District attended a Nellie Mae cross-site meeting once again in New Hampshire, where we had the opportunity to share ideas with the other 4 districts who received the grant to begin work on our logic model for the second year amendment. And I find it very exciting to hear about what other districts are doing, but also very affirming to see how far along we are. I would venture to say that we are probably the furthest along in community engagement in the work that we're doing, and sharing what has been happening with the other groups. There's a lot of interest in how we're doing what we're doing. Mary Lundeen, the superintendent in Winooski, and I, hopefully along with Matthew Webb from one of the fellows, will be presenting about our community engagement process and the community learning conversations at the Vermont Superintendents Association Conference in May. And you are more than welcome to attend the conference, the presentation, and we'll be actually sending you information about the conference because we are encouraging school districts to bring teams of board members, administrators to this conference. So you'll be hearing more about that. Anything else on Partnership for Change? Okay, I did miss under diversity equity that I'll be forwarding this email to you, but if you haven't yet received an invitation, Vermont Interfaith Association and Parents for Change is sponsoring a celebration of cultural diversity on Sunday, April 14th from 2 to 3:30 p.m. at the Integrated Arts Academy. It is open, and so I will forward this information on to you in case you're interested. Saving the best piece of news for last, we have concluded the principal search at the Sustainability Academy, and tonight I would like to present to you my recommendation for Principal of Sustainability Academy, Brian Williams. Yes, Brian, that is you. Again, a very extensive search, and many participants, several people around this table as well, and I think that Brian enters the position with a great deal of support, a great deal of enthusiasm, and commitment to the school, and hopefully we'll be approving that appointment later on in the consent agenda tonight. Thank you for staying for the introduction. And I think that's it.
Are there any other questions for Jeannie on this or these or any other issues at this point? I think we'll move on to then the committee reports, and I guess I would give the Finance Committee report, except that we have not had a meeting. We will be having a meeting on April 9th that will be the reconstituted Finance Committee, although the agenda has been made. So there is nothing to report there. Policy?
No meeting.
Also no meeting, as we've jumped the gun a week. Infrastructure and technology. I know we removed one item. Bernie?
No meeting. We'll be talking about the safety survey, and so will be presented. That'll be next Tuesday at our meeting.
Okay. And Kathy, curriculum?
We had a meeting. I have some slides. Thank you. We had 7 speakers for public comment, and they were about hockey. Comments included what we've heard, some of what we've heard tonight. Sports are a healthy risk for kids. Sports programs help kids struggling in school and improves student motivation. The hockey team helps, thank you, all its participants reach their personal best and keeps kids in school. A comment was made that the school board lacks a commitment to sports, and these parents that were mostly talking about hockey were also advocating for all sports, so I just thought I'd tell you what they all talked about.
And I also did hear the hockey parents speak up for drama and various co-curriculars.
I was about to ask, so
Yeah.
there were people speaking
Yes,
about things
they
besides sports.
very strongly. I think that they were looking at, there were a number of people who, even though they were hockey, they were speaking for all sports, and they also had, like the guy tonight, he had, you know, or the woman who had somebody in drama and somebody in sports. Yeah.
They turned it off. I haven't said anything yet. Thank you. Okay. And then the first thing we talked about was the PLCs. And so that's this slide. The change comes from the Agency of Education. We're required to meet regularly as a PLC for the purpose of reviewing data and planning instruction. The next steps are in the process, talking with administrators and the BEA. And just as a note, the high school, Hunt Middle School, and SA have had PLCs this year. Questions we asked were about whether a time in the morning for a PLC would be better than in the afternoon, and where could we read about PLCs, and that would be the February curriculum meeting on board docs. And also the PTOs are groups that will be spoken with as well. And then we had Amy Mellencamp talking about the 9th grade academies. She emphasized that the transition from 8th grade to 9th is a very big one, and that the high school teachers, the 9th grade teachers, tried to help students with this transition. Teachers have consistent expectations for all the 9th graders. Some of the teachers are working across subject areas like history and literature and combining to do integrated projects. And students who do need extra support, they're given that support because they get to go to a second session of their core classes the days that those core classes don't meet. There's a focus on writing, race, and diversity. This will continue into next year. And Amy mentioned that the BHS teachers, a group of them, are visiting a school in Maine to observe instructional strategies focused on differentiation. So I don't know if that's happened yet or not, but we'll probably hear about it. Also, the way the academies are set up, there's a lot going on, so we asked for a visual model, and Amy said she would do that. And then Jeannie spoke about the sequestration. I don't have a slide on that because I don't know where it stands at the moment. I don't know if there's any.
No change.
It's still predicted to happen.
Still predicted. Could happen as late as July. One of the thoughts from the committee, or maybe from Jeannie, was that we need a Plan B on that. And then that's my curriculum report, but I did go to a steering committee policy.
Before we switch off curriculum, I think Peter has a question.
Yep.
Yeah, out of curiosity, did Ms. Mellencamp speak to there being any noticeable benefits from within the freshman academy? Because as someone who did not participate in a freshman academy of any sort, I'm still kind of curious about whether the benefits of having this sort of team-based thing, similar to what we have in 7th and 8th grade in the middle schools, is that really helping people do better in writing and be more accepting of other cultures and all that? Was there any solid data on that, or is this still developing since this is like the pilot year?
I got the impression that it's helping, but it's still the first year, so I think we have to wait a little while to really find out.
All right, I'll come back in a few years.
Promise?
Aaron?
Yeah, if I remember correctly, there wasn't a whole lot of data discussed, but what she did talk about is that by grouping by grades, oftentimes you have students with similar concerns, interests, so you know, by having them together, it's easy to address all of those issues. But again, there was no data
Yeah, I mean,
presented.
we were grouped by grade when I was in 9th grade, but the segregation across grades within the high school is still pretty strict as far as I can tell. Except for the year-end studies program, which are integrated, but still. Okay. I was just curious to see if there's any new data, but I guess not.
Miriam, did you have something?
Yeah, I recall, or can I make a comment about the sequestration? So I recall there was one issue that came up about whether, I think Jeannie agreed that she would come back to us with different options about things that we might be able to cut and change to meet the sequestration goals. And so I actually wondered if we need to put a timeline on that, just so that we have that.
I'm not sure how to answer the question. It might be a finance committee discussion, perhaps. It might be a finance committee discussion. The timeline that exists is we start spending FY14 July 1st, even though if the sequestration actually takes effect the next fiscal year, that starts October, but we start spending it in July anyway. So, for example, if summer school were to be affected, we'd have to know that in the next month or so. If liaisons were to be affected, we'd have to know that in about the next 6 weeks or so. So there's a natural timeline that exists, say roughly by the end of May, on what we're spending a month later.
Right. And I think the question was we wanted sort of to know what are the other options besides liaisons and summer school at this point, whether there are any other options that we could consider. So seems to me that would be good to know prior to getting the sequestration information, more like informational.
Seems like a referral to finance.
Yeah, I think then.
Is that a referral to finance or?
Yeah, I guess what I'd say is why don't we put it down right now for finance for a week from tonight. My guess is there won't really be a report, but I think at least at a minimum we could, ask for a timeline and talk through the issue.
Thank you.
Kathy?
Okay, so I just want to have a few things from the steering committee to report. I just want to thank the other board members who came and interviewed the 3 candidates for the director position. I think it was good that so many of us were able to get there and talk to them all. And then I put up on the slides just a whole bunch of links and to presentations that we saw there are 2 slides of links. It was that kind of meeting where there was just a document or a PowerPoint to as part of the meeting. And the meeting minutes are online, are or I guess my slides with all the links could be put somewhere, if you're interested in any of those topics. We had Jeannie and the superintendent in Winooski presented the education quality presentation that we have seen already. Graduate expectations reported by Sarah Bertucci. She reported on what's happened since the February 2nd meeting, and the link to her report has lots of information. The mayor spoke about his week at BHS. There's a link there for what's happening at the state level. The school quality standards are being rewritten with the language of education quality standards, and Stephanie Phillips is part of that process. There's an article by Adam Urbanski, who came to speak here. Also, he's met with us a few times, so there's a link to his article. Design thinking for educators. It's an idea for sort of, as far as I can tell from what I've read, boosting thinking, boosting problem solving. It's used in corporations. It's just possibly, people are interested in applying it in education. Middlebury and Champlain colleges are interested in it. So there'll be a program this Thursday evening at the Main Street Landing, and there's more information as far as time and cost on the Partnership for Change website. And there's a report from our lead community partner, Voices for Vermont Children, and the work they've been doing. And that's it.
Any further questions about the Partnership for Change Steering Committee? Thank you, Kathy. At this point, I would look for a motion to approve the consent agenda. Moved by Commissioner Truman, seconded by Commissioner O'Rourke. The consent agenda is the one that's been handed out. I guess the one question I often ask, is there anything that needed to be either pulled off or anything in the minutes that needed to be corrected? Patrick?
I just had a question on one of the items on the consent agenda. The reduction in force recall .4 academic coach.
Yes.
What is that?
When I came to you at the March board meeting with the possible rifts under sequestration that might need to occur, one was a .4 academic coach unidentified as to where. As I explained at that time, there was very limited time to look at where we were going to find those funds. As we have been able to look at what funds exist and what funds exist for carryover, that is no longer on the RIF list. So therefore, you have to recall because you took action to RIF.
Excuse me. Thank you.
Greg?
I have a lot of acronyms to learn. There's a
Yes, you
column,
do.
it says FTE.
Yes, that's full-time equivalent, so a .8
equivalent.
FTE means somebody who's working 80% of the time. I also would like to point out, if I may, an announcement that I haven't sent to you yet, which is that Beth Giese, the longtime assistant principal at the high school, has announced her retirement.
Greg, did you have any more questions on any at this point?
No, thank you.
Okay. Is there any other discussion of the consent agenda? Aaron?
I don't know, I was just disappointed to see that Ruben will be leaving the high school, and I'm not sure of the circumstances or what's happening, but.
He was riffed.
Yeah, for being the last hire?
Correct.
Okay. And that was due to our budget?
cut. And so therefore, he's eligible for recall over the next 2 years.
Anything else related to the consent agenda? Seeing no more questions, I'd call for a vote. All those in favor of the consent agenda, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Consent agenda passes.
I need to abstain since I wasn't
Oh.
part of this board for all these minutes.
Noted.
Liz Curry.
Commissioner Curry?
That's right, you have 3 new people to learn.
Yeah. And Commissioner Jenkins and Commissioner Stoll have said the same. There are no more items on the agenda for this evening. I would therefore entertain a motion to adjourn.
No, executive
No.
session.
Uh,
I'm sorry, Keith, do we need executive session?
Well, I took it off, so we can do it at the next.
Okay, that's fine. Forgive me.
Okay, I'm sorry, yeah, it's not on the agenda, and we.
But it doesn't have to be, you can still.
I know,
yeah.
we don't have is there a motion for it or not? No? No. Okay. Therefore, seeing no other items, I would entertain a motion to adjourn. Is that you, Jill?
No, I have a question, actually.
Yes, okay.
Jeannie, you were going to confirm the work with...
Oh, thank you very much, Jill. So yes, Daniel Barron will be with us on Monday night, April 8th, from 6 to 9 p.m. We will be holding this work session at Rock Point. I will send this out to you in email as well. And the focus of his work is to continue the work from January and to start leading the board from the norms to visioning work. And then at that point, of course, working with the new chair, deciding where to go from there.
Okay.
Is there a way for new board members to get caught up on what went on in?
Sure, you've only missed one meeting.
Okay, is it
Very
something on
easy.
board docs or something like that?
There is an agenda, I mean, there were
basically
minutes,
norms.
but it was basically a listing of 6 or 7 things that we had agreed to.
And we'll be going over those at the
But I
beginning
guess
of
I
this
would
meeting.
say, if there is a way to get some, to bring you up to speed on the meeting, we will take a look. Keith?
6 to 9. And I'll send this out in writing. At Rock Point. It does get warned as a meeting. And it's at Rock Point. Yeah.
Is there food?
The question has,
Will there be food?
There will be food.
Okay.
Not sure what yet.
But it's not a potluck?
Actually, I think a potluck would be a wonderful
We did that
idea.
half and half last time.
Yeah. Would we be willing to do a potluck?
Yeah.
Yes?
Why did I say that?
You don't have to.
I just don't know how I'm gonna get anything.
yeah, we're going to strike that from,
Lucky to go.
If you are interested in contributing to a potluck, could you let me know and I'll fill in the gaps?
we will send out a notebook for
I think it's because
volunteers.
last time they.
Do I have a motion to adjourn? Commissioner Kranich seconded by Commissioner Deladuca. All in favor of adjournment, say aye. Aye. All opposed? Meeting is adjourned.